Hello, this is Pastor Marleen Griffith-Stull coming to you for the second Sunday of Christmas. That's January 3rd, 2021. And our gospel lesson for today is from the Gospel of John chapter 1 through 18. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and life was the light of all the people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. He himself was not the light, but he came to testify to the light. The true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world came into being through him, yet the world did not know him. He came to what was his own, and his own people did not accept him. But to all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave power to become children of God, who were born not of blood, or of the will of the flesh, or of the will of man, but of God. And the Word became flesh and lived among us, and we have seen his glory, the glory as of a Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. John testified to him and cried out, This was he of whom I said, He who comes after me ranks ahead of me, because he was sent before me. From his fullness we all have received grace upon grace. The law indeed was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God. It is God, the only Son, who is close to the Father's heart, who has made him known. The gospel of our Lord. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year as well. I know it doesn't feel like Christmas anymore when you drive around and you see less lights out, when many of us probably put away our Christmas trees, and certainly all the gifts are unwrapped, and it seems like Christmas is over. But in fact, there are 12 days of Christmas, and we are still in the Christmas season until we hit Epiphany, which is just in a few days. But January 6th is the end of Christmas and the beginning of Epiphany. And so we hear the Christmas story from John. Now, in typical John fashion, it doesn't sound like the birth of Jesus at all. It doesn't even sound like the Christmas story that you and I think of as the Christmas story. But the beginning of it is what we hear right before we light the candles for our candlelight services. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And then it talks about the light. All things came into being through him. What has come into being in him was life. And the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. And I want to talk a little bit more about this light, because not only are we physically in a dark time now, I mean, we're still close to the darkest day of the year, which was just December 21st. And so when you wake up in the morning, it's often still dark. And when certainly it's dark long before most of us go to bed at night. And so we feel that darkness. But as the calendar turned to 2021, most of us just wanted to tuck 2020 away and remember it as a dark year and move on into the light year of 2021 as opposed to 2020. The problem is there's still an awful lot of darkness around us. And if you don't believe me, just open up a newspaper or, get on your smartphones, and there's always a news feed. And in that news feed is always some dark news. And unfortunately, with the pandemic only getting worse in many parts of the United States and still many parts around the world, it is not all light and good news. We see a light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak, when we think about the vaccine, when we know that there are 2 vaccines that the FDA has already said yes to, and there's more on their way. But we also know that loved ones are getting sick. People, neighbors, and friends, and for some of you even family members, are still dying from this disease. And we still are restricted in what we're able to do. I'm still preaching to a video camera, for instance. There is a lot of darkness as we move in to 2021. But I don't want you to forget what Christmas is about. And at the heart of Christmas is that acknowledgement that God came to be with us. And in John's Gospel, when it is explained that God dwells with us, that God tents with us, that God lives right among us, the image is light, that there is light that shines in darkness, and that no darkness, no amount of despair, no amount of hopelessness, nothing can quench that light, that in our darkness we have seen and have heard testimony, and ourselves, being Christians, have testified to the light. And so I want you to remember today that the light is in the world. The true light, the light that can never be extinguished, the light that will go on eternally. That is the message of Christmas for John's Gospel. And it's a message that we so badly need to hear. But it's not just you that need to hear it. And what I want to remind you today is that as the world turns the calendar over, and as many people are still in darkness, you and I are not. In fact, you and I have never been in darkness. Yes, we have had dark moments. Yes, we have been in despair at times. Yes, we too have known pain and suffering. But we have become the children of God through our baptisms. We have always had Christ right with us. And when we've had Christ with us, we have had light. Sometimes it's been very dim. Sometimes it's been very bright. But we have carried the light of Christ with us. And I believe that those of you who are members of St. Mark Evangelical Lutheran Church have done a wonderful job of continuing to keep the light shining within you and sharing that with the other members of the congregation. I hear that you are calling one another, that sometimes you're writing or emailing one another, that you're checking in with one another. I know because when I talk to one of you, I hear an update about somebody else. So I know you continue to reach out. And I hope and trust that you keep doing that. But in 2021, I want to give you a new challenge. I want you to keep Christmas alive for all of 2021. And I want you to keep John's version of Christmas alive for all of 2021. Because John explains Christ coming into the world as light shining in the darkness, a light that no darkness can overcome. I want us to be the people that remind the world of this light. I want this to be the year when in your words and actions, you remind everybody that you see, everybody that you hear, everybody that you encounter on Zoom, or everyone that you encounter in email. I want you to shine the light of Christ on them. Sometimes that will be done by completely proclaiming it, by letting them know that if they're in darkness, there is light. And some of them, you know that they have a faith, so it's just reminding them of their own faith. For others, they might not share our faith, but that does not mean that you don't share the hope and the light of Christ. You share it by being a person who is filled with light and hope, by a person who does not show despair, because we are not people of despair. We are people of hope. We show it by sharing the grace that we've received from God, grace upon grace, as our gospel lesson tells us today. We show it by our demonstrations of love, by being the neighbor that Christ expects us and calls us to be, by being the one when somebody's in despair, to remind them that there is still hope. Where there is life, there is hope. And even in the midst of death, there is new life, and therefore hope, and light that cannot be extinguished. The whole image of the gospel is that Christ comes to dwell among us and brings us this light. We are not the light, just as John the Baptist said, he is not the light. When John says he's not the light, but he testifies to the light, that's what we're to do as well. But that doesn't mean the light is not among you and with you. There is light in each one of you. It was given to you the day you were baptized, the day you became a child of God. I encourage you, let that light shine. Let it shine even when darkness seems to overwhelm it. Let it shine in small ways, with a smile, with kindness, with generosity. But let it shine in big ways as well. When you know somebody really needs something, try to do it if you can. And if you can't, try to find somebody who can. But always let people know the hope that you have, because that will light the way. There will be many dark moments in 2021. And for that matter, there will be many dark moments until Christ comes in his fullness again. But you are the bearers of light. Let Christmas remain throughout this year. Let people see the light of Christ through your words and actions.